It started as something small. A simple act of self-care. I had been feeling tense for weeks, between work deadlines and trying to keep things together at home. I was exhausted. So when a close friend recommended a massage therapist who had helped her a lot, I didn't think twice. I booked a session, telling myself I deserved a little peace. Just 1 hour. 1 hour to relax, to breathe, to feel normal again. I had no idea that hour would change everything. When I first met him, he seemed kind and professional. His voice was calm, almost soothing. He asked the right questions, paid attention to the areas that were bothering me, and made me feel like I was in safe hands. I remember thinking, maybe this is what I needed all along. His studio was quiet, with soft music playing in the background and the warm scent of essential oils in the air. Everything about it felt right. But what happened next, that's where everything started to fall apart. I've been married for 6 years. My husband and I, we've had our ups and downs like every couple. Lately, things had been distant between us, and I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe we were just in a rough patch. Maybe we were both just tired. That's why I didn't tell him about the massage at first. I thought it was harmless. I thought it was just about me taking care of myself. But now I wonder, if I had told him, would things have been different? The first session went well. Too well, actually. I left feeling lighter, more relaxed than I had in months. So I went back. Once, then again, then again. And every time I did, I noticed the way he looked at me, just a second too long. The way he'd brush his hand near mine, or how his compliments became just a little too personal. I told myself I was overthinking. That he was just being nice. That maybe I was just reading into things because I hadn't felt seen in so long. But then came the moment that shifted everything. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet and unexpected. One choice. One touch. One line crossed. And in that moment, all the trust one thought I had, in him, in myself, in what I thought I understood about my own boundaries, shattered. I remember walking out of that room, my heartbeat loud in my ears, my mind spinning. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I didn't know whether to be angry, ashamed, or confused. Was it my fault for going back? Was it his fault for taking advantage of the situation? Or was it something more complicated than that? That massage was meant to help me. To heal me. But instead, it opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through. And what happened behind that door broke something inside me I'm still trying to understand. You're not going to believe how far this went. But I'm going to tell you everything. It all started 2 months ago. I was working overtime nearly every day, barely sleeping, and barely speaking to my husband. We were more like roommates than partners. He was always glued to his phone or buried in work, and I was constantly running on empty. I used to try and talk to him, to fix things, but eventually I gave up. I think we both did. That's why when my friend Emily told me about this massage therapist who worked miracles, I thought, why not? I wasn't looking for anything more than peace. Just a little space where I could finally breathe. His name was Jordan. He had a gentle confidence about him. The first time I met him, he asked if I had any injuries, what kind of pressure I preferred, and if there were any areas I wanted him to focus on. Completely professional. And honestly, during that first session, I felt more cared for than I had in months. That's what made it all feel safe in the beginning. He didn't push boundaries. Not at first. I even remember texting Emily after and telling her I felt like a new person. But something shifted during the second session. It was in the way he greeted me, how he said my name with this quiet smile like we were old friends. The way his hands lingered just a moment longer than they needed to. Still, it was subtle. Just enough that I second-guessed myself. I told myself it was nothing. That I was just sensitive because I was so emotionally drained. After all, wasn't this what a good massage therapist was supposed to do? Make you feel seen? Heard? I didn't mention any of this to my husband. Honestly, by that point, we barely had real conversations. We were living under the same roof but in different worlds. I think I was craving attention, something soft, something simple. And Jordan noticed. He started asking more personal questions, about my job, about how I was really feeling at home. His voice was calm, caring, and he listened in a way that felt rare. I didn't realize at the time how dangerous that was. Then came the fourth session. The moment that still replays in my mind like a scene I can't pause or rewind. It was like he knew exactly when to cross the line, exactly when I was at my weakest. I don't even remember the exact words he said. But the look in his eyes, the way everything suddenly felt too quiet, too close, I knew something had changed. And I couldn't take it back. After that session, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Everything felt different, even the air around. He'd ask if I was tired and then go right back to his laptop. I started sleeping with my back turned to him, and the silence between us grew louder. I wanted him to notice something was off. I wanted him to ask me what was wrong. But he didn't. And in that silence, I started feeling like maybe I didn't matter to him anymore. Meanwhile, Jordan kept texting me, simple things at first. A reminder about the next appointment. A quick hope you're feeling better. But then, the messages became more personal. You seemed a little sad today. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. And that's when the line between professional and personal began to blur completely. I should have blocked him. I should have said something. But I didn't. A part of me liked the attention, even if it was wrong. It filled a space inside me that had been empty for too long. Emily noticed I was acting strange. One day after work, she pulled me aside and said, "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell her. I wanted to let it all out, but I couldn't. I just nodded and said I was tired. The truth felt too messy. Too tangled. I wasn't sure where to start, or how much of it was even real. The next appointment came quicker than I expected, and I told myself I wouldn't go. But then, in a moment of weakness, I found myself walking through that door again. My heart was pounding, and my head was a storm of doubts. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Clarity? Closure? Or just someone to finally see me? What I didn't know was that things were about to spiral into something much darker than I ever imagined. I walked into the studio that day with every intention of setting boundaries. I told myself this would be the last time. That I needed to say something, make it clear, and walk away for good. But the moment I saw Jordan, all the words I had rehearsed on the drive over vanished. He smiled like nothing had happened, like everything was normal. His calm voice greeted me, and I nodded, unable to speak. My chest felt tight, and my thoughts were spinning, but I followed him to the room anyway. The lights were dimmer than usual, and the music had changed. It was slower, softer, almost too personal. As I lay on the table, fully clothed this time, I kept waiting for the right moment to speak. But then he started talking first. Not about the session. About me. About how he could tell I was struggling. That I seemed lonely. That I didn't deserve to feel that way. His words were careful, smooth, almost comforting. But underneath them, there was something else. Something calculated. I sat up midway through and said I wasn't feeling well. I expected him to step back, to let me go. Instead, he came closer, asking softly if I was sure. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to read the part of me I kept hidden. And for a split second, I froze. I didn't know what to say, or how to undo the weeks of blurred lines and unspoken feelings that had led us here. Then, his phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it, but I glanced at the screen and saw a name I didn't recognize. A woman. And that was the moment something clicked. I wasn't the only one. Maybe I never had been. Maybe this wasn't about connection or care. Maybe it was just a game he had played before. The room felt colder suddenly. My hands started to tremble. I stood up quickly, mumbling something about needing to leave. He didn't stop me, but his expression shifted. It was subtle, but I saw it, the flicker of control slipping. And as I walked out, heart racing, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Back in my car, I sat in silence. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from my husband. For the first time in weeks, he had noticed I wasn't home. But I didn't know what to tell him, because the truth was more complicated than I could explain. And what was coming next would force everything into the open. I sat in my car for almost an hour, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the storm inside me. My husband had called 3 times. I hadn't even noticed. When I finally picked up, his voice sounded different, more alert, even concerned. "Where are you?" he asked. I told him I needed some air, that I'd be home soon. I could hear the hesitation in his silence. He didn't push for more. Just said, "Okay," and hung up. But something about the way he said it gave me a strange feeling, like maybe he knew more than he was letting on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind tangled in what had happened at the studio, and what hadn't. I kept thinking about that text on Jordan's phone. About how quickly his expression had changed when I left. My gut told me there was something deeper going on, something I hadn't seen yet. And I was right. 2 days later, Emily called me. Her voice was sharp, almost panicked. "You need to hear this," she said. "And I need you to stay calm." She told me that another friend of hers, someone I barely knew, had been going to Jordan for sessions too. At first, it was just small talk between them, a coincidence. But when they both mentioned things he'd said, specific lines, compliments, the way he asked about their personal lives, they realized he had been saying the same exact things to both of them. Word for word. My stomach dropped. I felt sick. All that time, I thought I had been the only one caught in this confusion. But it turns out, I was part of a pattern. And suddenly, it all made sense, the practiced charm, the calculated questions, the way he seemed to know exactly when someone was vulnerable. He wasn't just careless, he was intentional. And I wasn't the first. But that wasn't even the worst part. Emily hesitated before saying the next thing. "Your husband. I think he's been following your location." I froze. She explained that during a conversation at a small get-together last week, he had asked her some strange questions. Like how often I mentioned my massage appointments. If I ever talked about the therapist. He hadn't said anything directly, but the way he asked, it wasn't casual. My heart was racing. I had no idea he'd been suspicious, let alone watching me. Now I was trapped between 2 crashing truths. 1, I had placed my trust in someone who preyed on brokenness. And 2, the man I'd been growing apart from was beginning to see the cracks I thought I was hiding. The walls were closing in. And I didn't know who to confront first, or what would happen when the truth finally surfaced. All I knew was, nothing was going to stay hidden much longer. That night, I sat across from my husband at the dinner table, and for the first time in months, we actually looked at each other. Not just glanced, but really looked. I could feel the heaviness between us. He set his fork down, cleared his throat, and said quietly, "I know you've been going to see someone." My breath caught. For a second, I didn't know if he meant Jordan, or emotionally. Maybe both. "I tracked your location once," he admitted. "I saw the same address come up a few times." I didn't want to believe anything was wrong, but I knew something was. There it was. The moment I had been dreading. I opened my mouth to speak, but he held up his hand. "I'm not here to yell. I just want to know the truth." Did anything happen?" I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. I told him everything, not in graphic detail, but enough. About how it started, how I felt invisible, how I mistook attention for care. I told him about the message I saw on Jordan's phone, about Emily's call, and about how I realized I had been manipulated, not just emotionally, but methodically. My husband's jaw clenched, his eyes glossing over with something between anger and disappointment. But then he said something I didn't expect. "I know him." I blinked. "What do you mean you know him?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Jordan. He used to date my cousin years ago. She broke it off when she found out he was messaging other women, clients. Said he always used his job to blur lines." My skin turned cold. Everything I thought I had just uncovered, he had known a piece of it all along. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why didn't you warn me?" "Because I didn't connect the dots until recently," he said, his voice low. "And because I didn't want to admit that I'd stopped paying attention to you." We sat in silence after that. Something about the truth airing out like that, it hurt, but it also made the air feel lighter. The next day, I reported Jordan. I contacted the women Emily mentioned. We shared our stories. And eventually, the wellness center where he worked let him go. I thought that was the end. But a week later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note: "You weren't the only one. You just talked." That one sentence flipped everything again. It meant someone else had been watching, someone who knew more than I did. It wasn't just about me, or Jordan, or even my marriage anymore. There were layers to this I hadn't even seen yet. And just like that, the peace I had started to feel was gone again. Because now I had a new question haunting me: who sent the letter? And why now? I held that note in my hand for a long time, staring at the words over and over again. You weren't the only one. You just talked. It felt like a warning. Or maybe a quiet cry from someone else too scared to speak up. Either way, it shook me. But this time, instead of spiraling into fear or confusion, I took a deep breath and decided I wasn't going to let it break me. I had already been through the worst part, losing trust in someone I thought was helping me, and facing the cracks in my own marriage. There was nothing left to hide anymore. I showed the note to my husband. His first instinct was to call the police, but without a return address or a clear threat, there wasn't much they could do. Still, we documented it. We saved screenshots, shared it with the other women, and even reached out to the center Jordan worked for. Turns out, the center had started looking deeper into his client history after our complaints. A few more women had stepped forward. Quietly. Anonymously. Some shared eerily similar experiences, same messages, same words, same pattern. That note, strange as it was, helped them feel less alone. Like someone was finally shining a light into the dark corners of what had been happening for far too long. As for me and my husband, we didn't fix everything overnight. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen with one apology or one confession. But we started talking again, really talking. He opened up about the pressure he'd been under, the guilt of drifting away, the shame of not noticing sooner. And I admitted that I had been emotionally disconnected too, and how easy it was for someone like Jordan to slip into the gaps we both left unattended. We decided to go to couples counseling. Not because we wanted to pretend nothing happened, but because we wanted to face it all together, messy truths and all. Emily stood by me through everything. Her support reminded me how important it is to have someone who tells you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. I also learned something else: self-care isn't just about quiet music and scented candles. It's about boundaries, about knowing your worth, and about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. That massage was supposed to help me heal. And in a twisted way, maybe it did, but not in the way I expected. It forced me to confront everything I had been avoiding. It taught me to speak up, even when my voice shook. And most of all, it reminded me that healing doesn't come from someone else's hands, it starts within. So if you've ever doubted your feelings, ignored a red flag, or questioned your own story, don't. Trust yourself. Speak up. Because your voice might be the one someone else is waiting to hear. And that note? I kept it. Not as a warning, but as a reminder of how far I've come. 27.